The massive dome of Kepler Station buzzed with energy as beings from across the galaxy gathered for the Tournament of Champions. Jake Martinez adjusted his uniform and looked around the preparation area. Creatures he had only seen in textbooks stood nearby, stretching massive limbs or sharpening deadly claws. The air smelled of ozone and alien sweat, mixed with the metallic tongue of advanced technology. Jake was not the biggest human. Who could have come to represent Earth? He was not the strongest either. But Admiral Kate Sullivan had chosen him for a reason. He was smart, adaptable, and most importantly, he noticed things others missed. Right now he was noticing how the other species looked at him with barely hidden amusement. The Kethari delegate stood nearly 8 feet tall, covered in scales that looked harder than steel. Its 4 arms ended in claws that could slice through metal. When it moved, the floor trembled slightly. The other competitors gave it plenty of space docked near the weapons rack. A Veltar warrior tested a blade that seemed to cut the air itself. The Veltar could read minds and move objects with their thoughts. Their pale blue skin glowed faintly, and their large black eyes saw everything. This one had already won 3 tournaments on other worlds. The Zephyrians floated a few inches off the ground, their technology so advanced it looked like magic. Energy crackled around their thin bodies as they adjusted devices that could probably destroy a small moon. They had ruled space for thousands of years before humans even discovered fire. Then there was Lyra. She sat alone in a corner, so small and quiet that most beings forgot she was there. Her species, the Ashanti, were known throughout the galaxy as peaceful farmers and craftspeople. They never fought wars, never built weapons, and never caused trouble for anyone. Lyra looked like she weighed maybe 90 pounds soaking wet. Her pale green skin was smooth and unmarked by scars. Her large, silver eyes watched everything but seemed timid, almost afraid. Most of the other competitors had not even bothered to learn her name. Jake had heard the Kethari refer to her as the weak one, and the Veltar had laughed when they saw her name on the participant list. Even the judges seemed surprised that the Ashanti had bothered to send someone, but Jake watched her anyway. During the waiting periods, while others boasted about their victories or showed off their strength, Lyra sat quietly and observed. Jake noticed that her eyes were not afraid at all. They were calculating, measuring, learning. When a minor dispute broke out between 2 competitors over equipment, Lyra had moved slightly closer to listen. When the station's environmental systems had hiccuped earlier, causing a brief change in gravity, she had been the first to adjust her posture perfectly. The first challenge was pure physical strength. Competitors had to lift and carry massive stone blocks across an obstacle course. The Kethari won easily, its 4 arms making the task look simple. Jake managed a respectable 3rd place, using technique and leverage to compensate for his smaller size. Lyra finished last, struggling with a block that was nearly as big as she was. The crowd barely noticed her efforts. The second challenge tested combat skills. Fighters faced off against combat drones programmed with the tactics of famous warriors from across the galaxy. Jake did well, using unpredictable human fighting styles that confused the mechanical opponents. The Veltar dominated with its mental powers, destroying drones before they could even attack. The Kethari simply smashed through everything with brute force. Lyra faced her combat drone and did something unexpected. Instead of attacking or defending, she stood completely still and watched the drone's movements for several minutes. The crowd grew restless, thinking she was frozen with fear. Then she began to move, not fighting the drone but dancing around it, staying exactly where its weapons could not reach. She never struck a single blow, but the drone eventually powered down, its programming unable to handle an opponent who refused to engage in combat. The judges were puzzled, but had to award her a completion score. Jake found himself more and more interested in the small alien woman. During breaks, he watched how she interacted with the station staff. She always said please and thank you in their language, even though most competitors treated the workers like furniture. She noticed when someone looked tired or stressed and would quietly move to help without being asked. The third challenge was a puzzle that required understanding alien mathematics and physics. Most competitors struggled with concepts that were completely foreign to their species. Jake used human creativity to find unconventional solutions, earning high marks for original thinking. But Lyra solved not just her own puzzle, but helped 3 other competitors understand parts of theirs. She did it so quietly and naturally that most people did not even realize what had happened. The mental challenges continued. Logic problems, strategic games, tests of memory and perception. Jake held his own through most of them, but he was not winning. The Kethari dominated physical challenges. The Veltar excelled at anything requiring mental powers. The Zephyrians had technology. That helped them with several tasks, but Jake kept watching Lyra, and he began to see a pattern. She was not trying to win individual challenges. Instead, she was learning from every single test, every interaction, every moment. Her scores were low, but her understanding was growing exponentially. The final challenge was announced as a survival scenario. All remaining competitors would be placed on a hostile planet simulation and have to work together to escape. It was meant to test leadership, cooperation, and adaptability under pressure. Jake smiled. This was where humans shined. This was exactly the type of challenge where unconventional thinking and the ability to unite different groups could make the difference. As the competitors prepared for transport to the simulation chamber, Jake made his decision. He was not going to just try to win this challenge. He was going to watch Lyra very carefully and see if his growing suspicions about her were correct. The transport beam activated, and suddenly Jake found himself standing in what looked like a frozen wasteland under an alien sky. Around him, the other competitors were already beginning to argue about what to do next. But Jake was watching the small figure in the distance, who was quietly examining the environment with those calculating silver eyes. The transport ship Meridian hummed quietly as it moved through hyperspace toward Earth. Lyra sat in her assigned quarters, staring out the small porthole at the swirling colors of faster-than-light travel. She still could not understand why the human had chosen her. The final challenge on the planet simulation had changed everything. When the other competitors had started fighting over limited resources and arguing about leadership, Jake had done something completely different. He had quietly approached each group and listened to their concerns. Then he had found Lyra, who had been mapping the environment and identifying safe paths through the dangerous terrain. Jake had asked for her help, not as a leader giving orders, but as someone who respected her abilities. Together, they had convinced the others to work as a team instead of rivals. Lyra had provided the environmental analysis and safe routes. Jake had coordinated the different species and their unique skills. The Kethari had provided muscle for clearing obstacles. The Veltar had used mental powers to scout ahead. The Zephyrians had shared technology for shelter and warmth. They had not just escaped the simulation. They had done it faster than any group in tournament history, and with 0 casualties. The judges had been so impressed that they had declared Jake the overall winner, even though he had not won the most individual challenges. Now Lyra was traveling to Earth as his prize, and she felt like a piece of cargo. The other passengers on the ship were mostly human crew members and a few alien traders. They were polite to her, but distant. She was used to being ignored or dismissed, but somehow it felt different now. She was supposedly valuable enough to be chosen as a prize, but she felt more worthless than ever. On the 3rd day of the journey, Jake knocked on her door. She opened it reluctantly. expecting him to give her orders or tell her what her duties would be when they reached Earth. Instead, he held up 2 cups of tea and asked if she would like to talk. They sat in her small quarters, sipping the warm drinks. Jake had chosen a blend that was safe for Ashanti biology, which meant he had researched her species' dietary needs. That small gesture surprised her more than anything else so far. "You think I chose you because I saw weakness," Jake said quietly. It was not a question. Lyra nodded, not trusting her voice. "I chose you because I saw strength that nobody else recognized," he continued. "During the tournament, I watched everyone. The Ketheri was obviously powerful. The Veltar was clearly gifted with mental abilities. The Zephyrians had superior technology. But you had something none of them possessed." "What?" Lyra asked, genuinely confused. "You understood people," Jake said. "Not just your own species, but everyone. You saw what motivated them, what they feared, what they needed. In the combat challenge, you did not defeat the drone by fighting it. You understood its programming well enough to make it defeat itself. In the puzzle challenges, you helped others not because you had to, but because you instinctively knew how to communicate complex ideas in ways different minds could grasp." Lyra stared at him. No one had ever described her abilities as a strength before. On her homeworld, her talents were valued, but they were considered normal. Every Ashanti could read social situations and understand different perspectives. It was how they had survived on a planet where cooperation was essential. "My people evolved on a world where competition meant death," she said slowly. "We had to learn to work together with many different species, or none of us would survive. Understanding others is not special for us. It is just how we think." "That is exactly why it is special," Jake replied. "Most species develop in isolation, competing with their own kind. They become very good at one type of thinking, one way of solving problems. Humans are unusual because we are adaptable, but even we usually think in human ways. You think in universal ways." Over the following days, their conversations continued. Jake told her about Earth and humanity's relatively recent entry into galactic society. Humans were still learning how to interact with alien species, still making mistakes because they assumed others thought like they did. Lyra found herself opening up about her own world and people. She explained how the Ashanti had developed their abilities over millions of years of cooperation with dozens of other species on their planet. They had learned to see patterns in behavior that crossed species lines, to understand the deep motivations that drove different types of minds. "We never developed advanced technology or great physical strength," she said. "We developed understanding instead." As they traveled, Jake introduced her to the ship's crew and passengers. Lyra quickly noticed the social dynamics at play. The human engineers were frustrated with a Zephyrian trader who kept criticizing their technology. The ship's doctor was having trouble treating a Veltar passenger because their physiology was so different from human norms. Without being asked, Lyra quietly began helping. She explained to the Zephyrian that the human engineers were proud of their work and would respond better to questions than criticism. She helped the doctor understand that Veltar psychology required a different approach to medical treatment, focusing on mental comfort as much as physical healing. The results were immediate and obvious. Tensions that had been building for days dissolved into productive cooperation. Problems that had seemed impossible became manageable when different perspectives were properly understood and communicated. Jake watched it all happen with growing amazement. Lyra was not manipulating anyone or using any special powers. She was simply helping different minds understand each other in ways that came naturally to her, but were revolutionary to everyone else. "This is why I chose you," he said one evening as they watched the stars through the observation deck windows. "Earth is facing challenges that require exactly your type of thinking. We need someone who can help us understand perspectives we have never encountered before. What kind of challenges? Lyra asked. Jake was quiet for a long moment. We have been receiving messages from deep space. They appear to be warnings about some kind of threat, but we cannot understand them properly. The mathematics make sense, but the underlying concepts are completely alien to human thinking. Our best scientists and linguists have been working on them for months with little progress. He turned to look at her directly. I watched you solve problems during the tournament by understanding how different minds approach the same situation. I think you might be able to help us understand these messages in ways we never considered. Lyra felt something she had not experienced since leaving her homeworld. She felt needed, not as someone weak who required protection, but as someone with unique abilities that could make a real difference. I will try to help, she said simply. As the Meridian approached Earth's solar system, Lyra looked out at the blue and white planet growing larger in the viewport. She was no longer traveling as a prize or trophy. She was coming to Earth as herself, with her own purpose and value. For the first time since the tournament began, she felt truly strong. Admiral Kate Sullivan's office overlooked the sprawling complex of Earth's Interstellar Defense Initiative headquarters. Through the large windows, Lyra could see humans working alongside beings from a dozen different species, all focused on protecting Earth and its growing network of allied worlds. The sight was both impressive and overwhelming. Jake had brought Lyra here directly from the spaceport, bypassing the usual diplomatic channels and cultural orientation programs. The urgency in his voice during their final conversation aboard the Meridian had prepared her for something serious, but she had not expected to be meeting with Earth's top military commander within hours of landing. Admiral Sullivan was a compact woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She studied Lyra carefully before speaking, and Lyra could sense the weight of responsibility and worry that the human carried. Commander Martinez has told me about your abilities, the Admiral said. Before we proceed, I need you to understand that what I am about to share with you is classified at the highest levels. Earth's survival may depend on keeping this information secure. Lyra nodded, feeling the gravity of the moment. Admiral Sullivan activated a holographic display that filled the center of the room. Streams of data flowed across three-dimensional charts, showing star systems, trade routes, and communication networks throughout known space. But there were dark spots on the map, areas where the data simply stopped. 6 months ago, we lost contact with the research station at Proxima 7, the Admiral began. Initial reports suggested equipment failure. Then, we lost the mining colony at Kepler 9, then the diplomatic outpost at Vega Station. Each time, there were brief emergency transmissions before all communication ceased. The hologram zoomed in on each location as she spoke. Lyra could see that they formed a rough pattern, moving inward toward more populated areas of the galaxy. At first, we assumed it was coincidence, or perhaps some kind of natural phenomenon, Admiral Sullivan continued. But then we started receiving these. The display changed to show complex mathematical equations and symbolic representations that hurt Lyra's eyes to look at directly. The patterns were unlike anything she had ever seen, yet something about them felt familiar in a way she could not explain. These transmissions come from the edge of known space, from systems we have never explored, Jake said. They repeat every 72 hours, but the content changes slightly each time. Our mathematicians can decode the basic numerical relationships, but the underlying concepts are completely alien. Lyra studied the symbols more carefully. There were patterns within patterns, relationships that seemed to exist on multiple levels simultaneously. It was like looking at a three-dimensional puzzle that existed in four-dimensional space. What makes you think these are warnings? She asked. Admiral Sullivan manipulated the display to show a timeline. The transmissions began exactly 12 hours before we lost contact with Proxima 7. Each time the pattern changes, we lose another outpost or station within days. The mathematical precision is too exact to be coincidence. Have you tried responding to the transmissions? Every method we can think of, Jake replied. Radio, quantum entanglement, even crude mathematical sequences. Either no one is listening, or our messages are not being understood. Lyra walked closer to the holographic display, letting her mind relax and approach the problem the way her people had taught her. Instead of trying to force understanding, she let the patterns wash over her consciousness and waited for connections to form naturally. The symbols began to feel less alien and more like a language she had encountered before, but not in the way humans thought of language. This was communication that existed at the level of concepts and emotions rather than words and grammar. These are not just mathematical formulas, she said slowly. They are trying to convey feelings and relationships between ideas. See this sequence here? It is not describing the destruction of a place. It is describing the fear and loss experienced by those who witnessed it. Admiral Sullivan and Jake exchanged glances. This was exactly the kind of insight they had hoped for. Lyra spent the next several hours studying the transmissions with the help of Earth's most advanced computers and analysis systems. The breakthrough came when she stopped trying to decode individual symbols and instead looked for emotional patterns that transcended species barriers. These messages are from survivors, she announced finally. Multiple species, all trying to warn others about something they call the silence. But they are not just sending information. They are sharing their terror and grief. The hologram shifted as Lyra input new parameters based on her interpretation. Suddenly, the seemingly random symbols began to resolve into coherent messages. The first clear transmission was a desperate plea from a species called the Mordak. The silence comes for those who shine too brightly in the darkness. They take our strongest, our most advanced, our most ambitious. Hide your light, appear weak, survive. More messages followed, each from a different species, all conveying the same terrible warning. The silence was not a natural phenomenon or a single enemy. It was a coalition of advanced civilizations that systematically eliminated species they considered threats to galactic stability. They target races that show rapid technological development, aggressive expansion, or unique abilities that could disrupt the established order, Lyra explained. They have been doing this for thousands of years, maintaining balance by preventing any species from becoming too powerful. Admiral Sullivan felt a chill as the implications became clear. Humanity fit the profile perfectly. They had gone from planet-bound to interstellar in less than a century, had shown remarkable adaptability in dealing with alien species, and were rapidly building alliances throughout their sector of space. How long do we have? The Admiral asked. Lyra studied the latest transmission patterns. Based on their previous targets and the progression of their campaign, they should reach human space within 6 months, maybe less. The room fell silent as they absorbed this information. Earth's military was advanced, but not nearly enough to fight a coalition of ancient civilizations with technology thousands of years ahead of human capabilities. There is more, Lyra continued. These survivor species have been trying to coordinate some kind of resistance, but they lack the resources and unity to be effective. They are all species that survived by appearing weak or hiding their true capabilities. She manipulated the display to show hidden communication networks connecting dozens of star systems. Species that the galactic community considered primitive or irrelevant had been secretly working together, sharing information and resources. They have been waiting for someone with the military capacity to fight back, she said. The transmissions are not just warnings. They are invitations to join their resistance network. Jake felt pieces clicking together in his mind. This was why Admiral Sullivan had sent him to the tournament, and why his instincts had led him to choose Lyra. Earth needed allies who understood how to survive against overwhelming odds, and more. Importantly, they needed someone who could facilitate cooperation between wildly different species and ways of thinking. Can you establish communication with these survivor networks? Admiral Sullivan asked. Lyra nodded. I believe so. But there is something else you need to understand. These species have survived by embracing their apparent weaknesses and using them as strengths. If humanity is going to join this alliance, you will need to change your entire approach to galactic relations. Admiral Sullivan looked out the window at the bustling headquarters below, where humans worked proudly alongside their alien allies, displaying their achievements and capabilities for all to see. You are saying we need to appear weak when we are actually growing stronger. Not just appear weak, Lyra corrected. You need to understand that what looks like weakness might actually be the greatest strength of all. The coordinates hidden in the survivor transmissions led to a system that did not appear on any official star charts. Jake piloted their small scout ship through a field of dead asteroids toward what looked like empty space. Only when Lyra activated the communication protocols she had decoded did the massive hidden station materialize around them. The structure was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. Instead of the clean lines and proud displays of power that characterized most galactic architecture, this station looked almost organic, as if it had grown naturally from the asteroid field. Docking bays opened like flower petals, welcoming them inside with gentle guidance beams, rather than harsh control signals as they disembarked. Jake found himself in a vast chamber filled with beings he barely recognized as sentient. A group of creatures that looked like oversized slugs moved slowly along the walls, leaving trails of phosphorescent slime that formed complex patterns. Tiny humanoids, no bigger than his hand, flew through the air on gossamer wings, communicating in sounds too high for human ears to hear. In one corner, what appeared to be a living tree swayed gently, despite the absence of any wind. Lyra moved among them with growing excitement, her gift for universal communication, allowing her to understand greetings and welcoming gestures that Jake could not even identify as such. A being approached them that looked vaguely like a cross between a turtle and a mushroom. Its voice was a soft whisper that somehow conveyed immense dignity and ancient wisdom. I am Elder Thum of the Mollusk Confederacy, it said through a translation device that turned its chemical emissions into words. We have been waiting for the young species called humans to find us. Jake felt humbled in a way he had not expected. These beings had been coordinating resistance efforts, while his people were still learning to walk upright. Yet they treated him as an equal partner, rather than a primitive newcomer. Elder Thum led them through the station, explaining its purpose and history. The facility had existed for over 10,000 years, built and maintained by species that had learned to survive by being overlooked. Each section was designed around the needs and abilities of different races, creating a truly universal environment. They passed through an area where the tiny flying beings called Pixari had established workshops that defied physics as Jake understood it. Technology no bigger than dust particles could apparently perform feats that human engineering considered impossible. The Pixari themselves were so small and delicate that most galactic civilizations had dismissed them as insignificant insects. In another section, the slug-like mollusks had created living computers from their own bioluminescent secretions. Information flowed through trails of light that covered entire walls, processing data at speeds that made quantum computers look primitive. Their method was so alien that most advanced species had never recognized it as technology at all. The tree-like beings called Rootkin had grown communication networks that spanned entire star systems. Through quantum entanglement of their root systems, they could share information instantaneously across impossible distances, but their method was so slow and organic that faster civilizations had ignored it completely. Each species that joins our alliance brings abilities that the silence does not recognize as threats. Elder Thum explained, "We survive because we appear primitive or harmless while developing capabilities that operate outside their understanding of power." In the central chamber of the station, representatives from dozens of species gathered for what Lyra realized was a war council disguised as a peaceful meeting. Maps made of living light showed the progression of the silence across the galaxy, marking not just destroyed worlds, but also hidden safe zones and secret supply routes. A Pixari delegate, speaking through a voice amplifier that made her whistle like language audible to larger beings, explained their intelligence network. Her people were so small and numerous that they could infiltrate any facility undetected, gathering information and even sabotaging systems from within. The mollusk representatives described their biological technology that could adapt and evolve faster than artificial systems could be programmed to counter it. Their weapons and defenses were literally alive, capable of learning and growing stronger with each encounter. The rootkin had developed something even more valuable, a communication system that the silence could not detect or intercept because it operated through quantum connections that appeared to be natural biological processes. As Jake listened to their reports, he began to understand the true scope of what they were facing. The silence was not just militarily superior. They had been eliminating potential threats for so long that they had become overconfident. They looked for specific patterns of technological development and aggressive behavior, but they ignored anything that did not fit their preconceptions about power and advancement. "This is why we need humanity," Elder Thum said, addressing Jake directly. "Your species has the military capacity and aggressive nature to fight the silence directly, but you also have the adaptability to work with our methods. Most importantly, your representative here has the gift to help coordinate our different approaches into a unified strategy." All eyes turned to Lyra, and Jake felt a surge of pride in his choice at the tournament. She had not just helped decode the transmissions. She was the key to making this entire alliance function. Lyra stepped forward, her small frame somehow commanding the attention of beings that dwarfed her physically. "I have studied the silence through your messages and observations. They are powerful, but they have a weakness. They think in terms of hierarchy and domination. They cannot comprehend cooperation between species that appears to make them weaker, rather than stronger." She activated a holographic display that combined information from all the allied species. "Their strategy depends on identifying and eliminating the strongest members of each civilization. They expect resistance to collapse once leadership is destroyed and superior technology is captured." The display showed battle patterns from hundreds of previous encounters. In every case, the silence had focused their attacks on obvious centers of power: military headquarters, technological research facilities, government capitals. They had never faced an enemy that distributed its strength throughout seemingly weak and insignificant components. "We can use this against them," Lyra continued. "Instead of meeting their strength with our strength, we will meet their strength with our apparent weakness. They will focus on the obvious threats while ignoring the real sources of our power." Jake began to see the strategy taking shape. Humanity would serve as the visible target, drawing the silence's attention with conventional military resistance. Meanwhile, the allied species would use their invisible capabilities to strike at the silence from within their own formations. The Pixari could infiltrate silence ships and disable them from the inside. The mollusks could deploy biological weapons that would adapt faster than silence technology could respond. The rootkin could coordinate real-time communication between all allied forces while remaining completely undetectable. But the most important element was Lyra herself. Her ability to facilitate understanding between radically different forms of intelligence would allow the Alliance to function as a single coordinated organism rather than a collection of separate species. Over the following days, they worked out the details of their strategy. Jake was amazed at how quickly seemingly impossible problems were solved when different types of thinking were properly coordinated. The Pixery provided miniaturization technology that could hide human weapons inside what appeared to be harmless cargo. The mollusks created biological computers that could run human battle management software while appearing to be simple organic material. The Rootkin grew communication networks that would allow human commanders to coordinate with allied species in real time while maintaining complete radio silence. Each piece of the plan was designed to look weak and primitive to silence sensors while actually being more advanced than anything they had encountered before. As their ship prepared to return to Earth with the Alliance agreements, Jake realized that his victory at the tournament had been even more important than he had imagined. By choosing Lyra, he had not just found a translator for alien messages. He had found the key to saving not just humanity, but potentially the entire galaxy. The Silence Fleet appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system, like a dark storm made of metal and malice. Their ships were massive constructs that seemed to bend space around them, each one capable of destroying entire worlds. Jake stood in the command center watching the sensor displays, knowing that conventional military thinking would see this as humanity's final moment. But conventional thinking was exactly what they were counting on. The silence to use. Admiral Sullivan activated the Global Defense Network, and human warships moved to intercept positions throughout the solar system. To outside observers, and especially to Silence tactical analysis, it looked like a desperate last stand by a young species that had finally attracted the wrong kind of attention. What the Silence could not see were the millions of Pixery infiltrators that had been seeded throughout their fleet over the past months. The tiny beings had traveled inside what appeared to be routine cargo shipments and communications equipment, so small that they barely registered as biological matter on silence sensors. In the hidden station beyond Pluto, Liara coordinated the real battle through the Rootkin communication network. Her consciousness expanded across multiple species and ways of thinking simultaneously, processing information faster than any single mind should have been able to handle. The gift that had seemed like simple empathy during the tournament had grown into something approaching omniscience when applied to coordinated intelligence networks. The first silence attack came exactly as predicted. Massive energy weapons designed to vaporize Earth's defensive positions struck with devastating precision. Human ships appeared to be destroyed, their crews lost, their technology captured or obliterated. But the ships that were destroyed were decoys, built around mollusk biocores that simply dissolved and reformed elsewhere when struck. The real human crews were safe in hidden bunkers throughout the solar system, controlling their weapons remotely through quantum entangled systems that looked like simple mineral formations to silence sensors. As the Silence Fleet moved deeper into the solar system, confident in their easy victory, the real counterattack began. Pixery technicians inside Silence ships began systematically disrupting critical systems, not with explosions or obvious sabotage that would be quickly detected, but with tiny modifications that caused cascade failures throughout their technology. Navigation systems began calculating incorrect coordinates. Weapons targeting computers developed subtle errors that made their shots miss by thousands of kilometers. Life support systems started producing atmosphere that was technically breathable, but caused gradually increasing fatigue and confusion. The mollusk bioweapons deployed from what appeared to be space debris. Living viruses designed to attack artificial intelligence systems infected the Silence computer networks, adapting and evolving faster than their security protocols could respond. Each time the Silence thought they had identified and countered. The intrusion. It had already mutated into something completely different, but the most devastating attack came from an unexpected source. Lyra had discovered during her analysis of silence tactics that their coordination depended on rigid hierarchical communication structures. Each ship received orders from larger command vessels, which received their instructions from massive control ships that directed entire battle groups. The Rootkin had spent months growing quantum-entangled root networks inside what appeared to be standard communication relays. Now they activated those networks to create feedback loops in the silence command structure. Orders became confused, contradictory, and increasingly chaotic as the organic communication system interfered with artificial military protocols. Within hours, the mighty Silence fleet was experiencing system failures, communication breakdowns, and coordination collapse on a scale they had never encountered. Their technology, designed to counter conventional military threats, was completely unprepared for biological and quantum attacks that operated outside their understanding of warfare. Lyra had realized something even more important than tactical advantage. Using the Rootkin network, she had established communication with the Silence themselves. For the first time in thousands of years, someone had tried to talk to them instead of simply fighting or surrendering. The response came as a flood of mathematical concepts and emotional patterns that nearly overwhelmed even her enhanced consciousness. The Silence were not evil conquerors driven by malice or greed. They were survivors of a cosmic catastrophe, so terrible that it had fundamentally changed their understanding of existence itself. Their homeworld had been destroyed by chaos, by the unpredictable interactions of multiple species and civilizations that had grown too powerful too quickly. They had witnessed the collapse of galactic order when too many different ways of thinking and being had tried to coexist without proper coordination. The Silence had dedicated themselves to preventing that catastrophe from happening again by maintaining strict control over which species were allowed to develop advanced capabilities. They eliminated threats not from hatred, but from a terrified certainty that uncontrolled diversity would lead to universal destruction. Through the quantum network, Lyra shared her own understanding. She showed them the alliance of seemingly weak species, demonstrating how cooperation and coordination could create strength without creating the chaos they feared. She helped them see that their own rigid hierarchy was actually a form of weakness, brittle and inflexible compared to the adaptive resilience of distributed cooperation. The battle ceased as abruptly as it had begun. Silence ships stopped their attacks and began broadcasting new signals, confused and uncertain. For the first time in millennia, they were reconsidering their fundamental assumptions about power and survival. Jake watched in amazement as Lyra negotiated not just a ceasefire, but a complete transformation of galactic civilization. The Silence agreed to join the alliance as equals rather than conquerors, contributing their advanced technology and accumulated wisdom to the cooperative network. The alliance that resulted combined the best aspects of every member species: human adaptability and courage, pixery precision and infiltration capabilities, mollusk biological innovation, rootkin communication networks, Silence advanced technology, and dozens of other unique contributions, all coordinated through